Anyone like to come up for a story this morning? Are you? That's too bad. You didn't get to sleep in, right? I have. This story is the greatest story ever. There is no story that's older, there's no story that's bigger, there's no story that's more true than this story.
Yeah, it's called the Great Story.
It's called the Great Story. Because this is the story of how we got here.
Maybe a revolution? Oh, my mom has one of these. Yeah,
And the whole story
wow.
is on this chain.
Remember that?
Now, some of you might remember this from last year, because this is the time of year that we remind ourselves again of this story. And so let's...
Yeah, why did you bring your pillow?
I guess she's tired.
Oh my God.
So I'm going to tell the story this week, and then I'm hoping next week that you will all be able to tell this story to me.
Is that what we do?
And so it begins before, and this is even hard to imagine, it's before anything that we know. It's before, it's like nothing. It's like before nothing.
It's black.
And it's just mystery.
It's black.
And all of a sudden, out of this mystery, out of this silence, out of this black, there was, in one fraction of a second, there was a bang!
Startled.
Bang! And all of a sudden, light and heat started to bubble out of nothing like foam, and it just spread out far and fast and hotter than you could possibly ever imagine. And as that heat and that light started to push out, it started to form into galaxies, into these amazing clusters of dust and light and heat. And in these galaxies, there were stars, and stars were great balls of heat and light. Well, and in that, one star was our sun. Our sun, our own sun, which has been putting out light and heat for billions and billions of years. And when that sun was formed, bits of it were scattered through space, and some of it congealed into balls, and one of them became a hot, molten ball that we know as the planet Earth. And when it first began, it was just a big, molten piece of rock. And at some point, something hit it and knocked some of it away, and it became our moon that started to move around this molten Earth. Well, it was so hot that moisture started to rise off the surface, and it came down as rain. And it rained and it rained and it rained until the whole surface was covered with water. With water. And in that water, the first bits of life form, little tiny bacterias that grew in the water. And as those life forms got together, they turned into the first creatures, single-celled fish like jellyfish. Yeah. Well, after a time, these jellyfish learned that they needed to grow shells. Otherwise, they got eaten by each other. And so they grew shells and became creatures that lived in shells. That's one of the mysteries.
It's easy.
And then out of those, we started to get bigger fish in the water. And then as the earth started to cool, land started to appear. And the first of our plants started to appear on dry land. And so some of the creatures that had lived in the water jumped up onto the land. Things like frogs and salamanders. And they grew legs and they learned to breathe air. And also we got mosquitoes and dragonflies and other kinds of insects that all started to live at the same time. Well, as more and more land appeared, bigger plants, trees started to grow. Big, big, massive trees, way bigger than most trees that we see today. And that allowed creatures to get so big that eventually we had dinosaurs. And we had these big, big dinosaurs on land, and we had these big, big dinosaurs that lived in the water. And they were the most common animals on the planet for millions of years. And then one day, a meteor, a big piece of rock, crashed into the earth. And it threw up so much dust that it blocked out the sun. And almost everything that was alive died in a very short period of time. All the dinosaurs disappeared, except for a few small creatures like turtles that burrowed under the sand. And some of the small mammals. Do you know, at this time, horses were only this tall?
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, horses were only this tall.
Like they're almost as big as my toy horses.
Yeah. And these tiny little mammals also survived because they could go into burrows and survive on just what was left around. Well, eventually, the sun came back out and the dust receded and things started to grow again. And so these small mammals got bigger. And then we had mammoths and saber-toothed tigers. And then we had what we call the primates, the monkeys, the apes, the orangutans, the gorillas. And at the same time, more and more plants were growing, all kinds of flowers and grasses, things that we could eat. And then with that came the first human beings. And they were doing pretty well until the earth got really, really cold again and it got covered in snow and ice. And they had to learn how to take fire and keep it all the time, to keep them warm and to cook their meals. And so they developed fire. Once they had fire and they could stay warm, then they started to domesticate animals. They domesticated horses, and the horses were big by this time. And they had cats and dogs that they had for the first pets. And then they started to move from living by themselves to living in cities. And they built cities together, and that's where they lived. And then, over time, each of us was born?
Jim.
Well, this one says Jim because this is my necklace, but it could say any of us. And this whole story took almost 14 billion years. Can you imagine that?
To solve?
That's how long it's been since that first bang. For almost 14 billion years. And the very last one on here is a question mark, because it's, I wonder what happens next.
Yeah, but you don't know this. Because it was atoms and then to make the Big Bang, so it
Well, possibly, yes.
a bunch of atoms.
So that's the great story. That's the story of how we got here. So
You just said.
we're going to sing a song, and we're going to be singing this for a few weeks because it's a really neat song, and it's one that you'll be able to sing yourself. And it's called Cosmic Hymn of Praise. So let's sing that together.